The Chicago Bears game against the Los Angeles Chargers was a test. Were the Bears making real progress with wins against the Commanders and the Raiders, or were they just beating up on bad teams? You saw Justin Herbert showed us the answer.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at Locked On Bears. You can like Locked On Bears on Facebook. Join the Locked On Bears Facebook group for even more Bears talk. And make sure you hit that subscribe button on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel to keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On the show today, we recap another tough Chicago Bears loss, this time at the hands of the Los Angeles Chargers, and really like what this game showed us and taught us about this Bears team. One, some real limitations with the Tyson Bagent-led offense, that no, he was not the answer to everything that was ailing this offense and not some perfect solution and all of a sudden a better option than Justin Fields. No, a quality backup with some upside, but some very real limitations on offense. We also learned that this Bears defense, maybe not making the progress that you were hoping they made, maybe just having a good time against bad quarterbacks and bad offenses the last couple of games, but Justin Herbert, a different animal, and the results matched. And then we'll wrap up, though, looking for some of the positives. There are always some positives we can take even from some of these losses and bad games that we can look ahead moving forward that, hey, maybe things won't be as bad next week or in the coming weeks ahead of this team. But we should start with Tyson Bagent because he was the story of the broadcast, certainly, and the guy that we all had our eyes on. Okay, what was his follow-up gonna be to his first career start, his first career win against the Raiders, coming into Los Angeles against a Chargers defense that had been struggling a bit, and you wondered, perhaps matchup-wise, if the Bears could find some room to get some passes going underneath and make some plays after the catch. And we saw against the Raiders last week, there was this formula for what the Bears offense needed to do to be successful with a quarterback like Bagent. You know, he's not a dynamic playmaker, but efficient, takes care of the football. So what you got to do in order to win with Bagent is run the ball early and often, effectively, control the clock with the ground game, use that running game while also being smart with the football and not getting, penalties and plays for a loss to stay ahead of the sticks. Keep Tyson Bagent in second and medium, third and short situations and not in second and long, third and longs where you need him to throw beyond the sticks and downfield. And then you just got to take care of the ball and not turn it over. And, your defense has to generate some of those turnovers. And the Bears didn't really do much of that at all. Any of it? They ran the ball okay. They averaged less than 4 yards a carry, but they were pretty close to 4 yards a carry with Foreman and Roschon Johnson. But as a team, they did not run the ball nearly enough because they were down on the scoreboard so quickly. And when you're losing, it's hard to stick with the running game. And of course, then they were moving backwards. So when you get second and long and third and long, it was a lot of the same offensive problems we had seen earlier in the season with Justin Fields, right? Justin Fields has been a lot of those same, it'll be second and 10 because the first down run goes for 0. And then, there's an incomplete pass or a tackle for a loss, and it's 3rd and 12. And then you're trying to throw past the sticks, but you don't have a lot of 3rd and 12 plays in your playbook. And whether it's Tyson Bagent or Justin Fields, the Bears offense is not doing well in those situations when you're not running the ball, when you're not making it easier on your quarterback. And your offensive line is struggling against Bosa and Mack. And, certainly there's still, Bagent was able to avoid sacks a little better than Fields did, but not able to make a lot of those same dynamic plays that Fields can. To Bagent's credit, they came out on the first play of the game, and he hit his deepest pass of the year, a completion to Darnell Mooney that he was never touched down and could have ran for a touchdown or at least a field goal, and certainly that could have changed some of the trajectory of the game. They did open up downfield passing a little bit more, and when you look at Tyson Bagent's NFL Next Gen Stats chart that tracks all of his throws across the field, he had 3 passes of 35 yards or more in the air, the one complete to Mooney and then 2 other incompletions. Those were his only passes deeper than 20 yards, but you see, like, generally a couple more passes beyond 15 yards. They tried to throw downfield a little bit more and check down a little bit less, but it was still largely a lot of quick throws underneath, because that's what Bagent is good at. And right now, given the state of this offensive line and just where your offense is in general, like, that's kind of what your team is right now. You got to get the ball to Moore, get the ball to Mooney, get the ball to your backs, maybe Tyler Scott, and have them make some plays after the catch, the way we saw them do it against the Commanders and the Raiders. But they couldn't nearly as effectively in this game. And certainly, Bagent threw a bad interception to the left sideline that looked like he underthrew the comeback route to DJ Moore, but it was hard to tell which of there were 2 receivers in the area. I don't know if he overthrew the shorter one or underthrew the longer one, but regardless, bad interception. Had a couple of those other passes that could have been picked off that weren't, and then the one over the middle to Darnell Mooney where he was hit and then picked off. Like that one shouldn't have been picked off, but it made up for a couple of throws earlier that should have been picked off. So I think, you could say that one was unlucky, but then he got lucky with other ones and it balanced out pretty well. Like, Bagent is still learning and still has flaws and isn't a high velocity thrower. I think sometimes we get confused, like, with arm strength as a quarterback trait. Like, Bagent, we saw he can throw it 40 yards in the air. The question was never, can he throw a ball a long distance? It's how quickly can the ball get there when he lets go of it on either deep throws or underneath throws. It's velocity. It's time in the air, because a lot of his passes hang up in there, and that gives defensive backs a chance to go pick it off, right? He releases the ball quickly. He makes a quick decision, but from the time it leaves his hand to the time it gets to the receiver is a little bit slow. And that's where he almost got picked off on a couple of different curl routes and things like that. Because again, like, that's the offense has to be a little bit more simple right now for Bagent as he still gets up to speed and running everything as a rookie quarterback. Like, it's all expected for Bagent, but it should bring us back down to earth a little bit on what Bagent is and isn't. Right now, he's a fun, young, quality backup quarterback that maybe has some starter upside, but, still has to earn that and get there. But for now, he's a quality backup and somebody that you can feel like you have a chance when he's playing for you if you can run the ball, take care of the ball, stay ahead of the sticks, and maybe get a couple of turnovers from your defense as well. And maybe have your wide open 3rd round pick wide receiver not trip over himself in the end zone and drop a pass that literally landed in his chest on the ground. Velus Jones, how many times have we said, like, he should have been cut a long time ago? Why they continue to give him these chances? It's like, and his teammates have to look around and see that guy's getting special treatment. Why are we giving this guy special treatment when I'm working just as hard as that guy, but he gets special treatment and keeps messing up? And in the NFL, like, it's a business. And sorry, Velus Jones is probably a very nice man, a good person, a good human being who deserves good things. But in football, fool me once, shame on me. Fool me 17 times with Velus Jones now. We got a special teams penalty in this game. What are we doing there? I mean, what are we doing with Velus Jones? But to the point, like, players not helping Tyson Bagent enough, because Bagent is a quarterback that needs some help. Needed more help from his defense that was way too vulnerable against Justin Herbert and company in this game. We'll go through the lack of tackling, the lack of execution from this Bears defense that feels like it's turned back into a pumpkin after being the carriage for Cinderella, next on Locked On Bears. The Locked On Bears podcast is brought to you by our friends at eBay Motors. eBay Motors has teamed up with the Locked On Fantasy Football podcast and their host, Vinny Iyer, to bring you some of the best fantasy football picks each week, all season long. Whether you're doing daily fantasy football each week or you're scouting the waiver wire for your season-long team, every week we're going to provide you with players that are guaranteed to fit on your roster. So let's see who Vinny's picked out for us on this week's eBay's Guaranteed Fit Player Fantasy Pick of the Week. Carolina Panthers running back Chuba Hubbard got the lead duties in Week 8 against the Texans, despite Miles Sanders being available. And although Hubbard struggled to get going in that matchup, he should find more running room at home against the Colts breaking down front. The Panthers' power running should yield better results, but Hubbard can also have a bigger impact in the passing game to deliver all around as a fantasy sleeper. Vinny Iyer from Locked On Fantasy Football. It's going to help you win your fantasy championship, and eBay Motors knows a championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. The same thing is true for your vehicle. With over 122 million parts for your car, you can make sure that your ride stays running smoothly. Quick story for you. Last week, getting on the highway, car dies. Pull over, I can't accelerate. Long story short, tow truck, mechanic, my fuel pump assembly out. Cannot gain fuel from my gas tank to my engine. Ends up being a $700 repair when it's all said and done. They got the part, put it in. I looked on eBay Motors and get that fuel pump assembly on eBay Motors for my exact make and model of my vehicle for about $100. Could have popped off the back seats, installed it myself. My brother's pretty good at cars. We could have done that repair with eBay Motors for $100. Instead, I spent $700 at my local mechanic, and that's why eBay Motors is my go-to for auto parts in the future. At that point, I was a little bit stuck on the side of the road. I couldn't go to eBay Motors then, but in the future, I know if I've got the flexibility, go get the part from eBay Motors because I'm going to save myself a lot of money. Whatever your ride needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay's guaranteed fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. So keep your car running smoothly at ebaymotors.com. eBay guaranteed fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. It felt like this Bears defense had started to turn a corner when they shut down Russell Wilson for a half against the Broncos, then stayed pretty good against Sam Howell for most of that game, a couple vulnerabilities, but Commanders' game was pretty good defense, then solid against the Vikings without Justin Jefferson, held them to really, 12 points of offense because there was a defensive touchdown that scored, pretty darn good against a Vikings team that's looking solid before Cousins got hurt. And then last week against the Raiders, shutting down that offense, and it was okay, maybe this Bears defense is settling in and building something. Here's their real test. A pretty good Chargers offense that's been up and down, but they can be good when everything's clicking. How will the Bears respond and come out against this Chargers team? And they scored on, their first 5 or 6 drives straight? It's touchdown, field goal, touchdown, field goal. They didn't punt until the second half. I tracked all the drives. Let me see. So it was touchdown, field goal, touchdown, field goal. And then they didn't punt for the first time until the second half. The Chargers gashed the Bears up and down the field. And I think the thing that was more frustrating about it, it wasn't like Justin Herbert was throwing these deep bombs all over the field. His passing chart actually looks a lot like Tyson Bagent's. He had 2 passes over 20 yards downfield. And really only one was about 44 yards to the left sideline, and then one was about 24 yards to the right sideline. Everything else Herbert threw was 20 yards or less. There's a lot of underneath throws, including all 3 of his touchdowns. He kind of did the Tyson Bagent game plan. Throw it short and let playmakers make plays after the catch. And that's what they did. Their guys made the plays after the catch, particularly Austin Eckler. If you look at Austin Eckler as a receiver in this game, Next Gen Stats said that Austin in the first half had 116 yards receiving. 105 of those came after the catch. That's the most yards after the catch by any player in a single half this season. The Bears could not tackle Austin Eckler. They could not tackle Quentin Johnston, who threw all the defensive backs off of him throughout the game. They could not tackle the big basketball player tight end, Donald Parham, who was just stronger than everyone else. They could kind of tackle Keenan Allen sometimes, but not great. The Bears across the board. The linebackers were missing tackles. The DBs were missing tackles. They were taking terrible angles on those screen passes that gashed the Bears. It was yards after catch and bad tackling. It's one thing if it's okay, Herbert's got this cannon arm and he is just firing you downfield and these guys are blowing by you and outrunning you or whatever, or they're running good double moves and it's you kind of tip your cap and go, okay, they're out scheming you and out game planning you or whatever. But this was just, hey, throw it short and tackle the guy. The Bears defense wants you to throw it short. They play those soft zone coverages so that you'll throw it short, they'll tackle you, and they'll bet that you can't do that 15 times down the field to score a touchdown. And so the Chargers did what the Bears defense wanted them to, and they ate them up. Doesn't help that once again, not zero pressure, but almost no pressure on Justin Herbert through the majority of that game. He could stand in that pocket, maybe step to the left here, step to the right there, but deliver the throws. He was fairly clean. They weren't really disrupting him. They did not sack him a single time. They hit him a couple of times, but no sacks on Justin Herbert and just not a generally high rate of pressure. We'll see what the pressure numbers are when they come out, but like you can get away with not pressuring a quarterback when it's Brian Hoyer and maybe when it's Sam Howell. And I guess sometimes when it's I guess you couldn't really get away with it against Kirk Cousins, but you know what I mean? Like it works against bad quarterbacks. But quarterbacks in that upper echelon elite category, wherever you want to rank Justin Herbert, he's better than Brian Hoyer. Like you can't win that way as a defense. You mean he's just going to be able to slice and dice you too much when he has clean pockets for the vast majority of the game. And then, of course, you got to actually tackle these guys. So it felt like a real coming back down to earth for this Bears defense and pretty strong evidence that, like, no, they were just beating up on bad quarterbacks. I mean, the stat was circulating around. I don't know if David Kaplan put it out first, but I've seen a couple people reference it, listing all the quarterbacks that Matt Eberflus and the Bears have beaten in his era. And I don't have the list, but it's the guy who talked about it. It's Hoyer, it's Howell, it was Trey Lance, and whoever started for the Texans last year, Davis Mills. Like the Bears have only beaten terrible quarterbacks so far under Eberflus. And it's because they don't have a pass rush and because they can't tackle consistently and because they're not blitzing enough then when their pass rush isn't there and because they've been injured in the secondary. Like, sure, it's fair to say, like, yeah, not having Eddie Jackson or Jaquan Brisker hurt a lot. But is that the reason why they gave up 30 points? Like if you had Brisker and Jackson, how many fewer points do you give up in this game? So you only give up 20, but you score 13, so you still lose. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think they lost because Jackson and Brisker were not there. I think the defense would have been better with either of your starting safeties or both, certainly. But it was a mess all around. They wouldn't have improved the pass rush there. We've seen Brisker and Jackson miss plenty of tackles too. Like, would they have solved all the tackling? No, not all the missed tackles were your two safeties, but I think a couple of those like screen passes that go for 60 yards, maybe they only go for 20. If you got Jackson and Brisker back there, you get better angles on those kind of plays. But the play that's thrown for 3 yards and then he gets 7 more after the catch, I don't know that your safeties are really going to fix that for you. So it just kind of leaves us back where we were with this Bears team before they beat the Commanders. When we were sitting there at 0-4 and feeling like, yeah, you got to fire this coaching staff because nothing is working. Like, we're back to nothing working. It worked for a little bit against some bad teams on both sides of the ball, but nothing's working. And it's not going to get easier next week against the New Orleans Saints team that's got a pretty good defense too, and at times can figure some things out offensively. We got time before we have to preview the Saints, but I do want to get into some of the positives that come out of this game and that we can look ahead to moving forward, because we're back to doom and gloom Bears, which is like our comfort zone. That's what we're used to around here. But I still like to kind of find some things to leave you with, like, oh, this is going to get better, and this is starting to look better. And here's some positive ways they can go from here next on Locked On Bears. The Locked On Bears podcast is brought to you by our friends at DoorDash. DoorDash is a great way to get all of your favorite local foods delivered right to you, right to your door. And right now, we're making it a lot easier for you with a special LOCKED23 promo code. It's going to get you 50% off your first DoorDash order. But it's great because, especially if it's, before the game, you want to get your dinner squared away, but you got other stuff to do around the house, or you don't want to go to the grocery store right before kickoff because everybody's running to the grocery store for their pregame parties and stuff. DoorDash can deliver you your groceries, or if it's halftime and you're hungry and it's time for a meal or a little extra snack, DoorDash can service you all of your local favorites. And it's a great way to support local restaurants in your community, especially, across the Chicago area. You've got a bunch of great local restaurants, especially, feels like to me, halftime is a great time to DoorDash yourself some Rosati's pizza. Pizza's a great game day food in general, but so a nice local establishment, like a Chicago staple like Rosati's, delivered to your house via DoorDash is absolutely the best way to do game day. And the best way to get your Rosati's delivered is with DoorDash, because you're going to get 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order when you download the DoorDash app and enter our code LOCKED23. Subject to change. Terms apply. That's 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 or more on your first order. Just download the DoorDash app and use our promo code LOCKED23. Okay, so Tyson Bagent has some very real limitations. The offense has very real limitations. The defense, maybe not so fixed, maybe beating up on some bad quarterbacks. Things are not good. No bueno right now with the Chicago Bears, but it's not all bad. I think we can find a few positives to take away from this game. First of all, the Bears' run defense continues to play strong. Like, yes, they couldn't tackle after the catch. They couldn't stop Herbert. They couldn't get pressure on Herbert. But the Chargers did not run the ball well in this game. Eckler finished 15 carries for 29 yards. I'm no mathematician, but that's less than 2 yards per carry. Their longest run was 7 yards. The backup running back, Kelly, 6 carries for 21 yards, 3.5 yards per carry. As a team, that adds up to 54 yards rushing they had as an offense. That's not good rushing. The Bears are still a stout run defense team. That to me feels like something that is a little bit more solidified as a defense. They're always, not always, but they're locked into me as a team that I trust to be able to stop the run pretty well. And the Chargers weren't never like a great rushing team, but they've been like an average rushing team. And if you can really shut down an average rushing team, then you feel like there's a legit, like, the week in and week out, the Bears run defense has been really solid, and they've been able to absolutely do that and continue that here moving forward. Offensively, the Bears didn't run the ball a ton, and it wasn't like super successful, but like you can still see Foreman is running hard. He's hard to tackle. It was nice to see Roschon Johnson get a few handoffs in there, kind of get some of his legs under him a little bit, right? Keep him involved in this offense coming back from that concussion. Like, good to see him involved. And even, I'm not a big Darrington Evans fan in some situations, but he had a couple of nice runs, including the rushing touchdown. Like, yeah, he's like, I didn't like that they threw it. It was like 3rd and 3, and they threw a curl route to him as the first read. Like, he's a fine player, but the way they use him just bothers me a little bit. But like, they were still able to get some nice runs in there. All three of those backs had 10+ yard runs. Like, Evans had a run of 11, Roschon had a run of 11, Foreman had a run of 12. Like, the remnants of the running game were still there. There were too many of those plays that were hit at the line of scrimmage or in the backfield for a loss that brought their average down. But like, we saw the kind of like physical hard running from a few of them that reminds you, like, yeah, these backs are still good. The O-line was up and down, but especially in the running game, but the backs are still really talented. And so you can still run the ball well, and you can still stop the run well. Like, that is something. It's not worth a lot when you lose 30-13 because, again, in the modern NFL, passing game reigns supreme on both sides. But those are like parts of the equation, right? Like, if you can't run the ball and you can't stop the run, it's a big problem. Like, doing those things well doesn't win you games, but not doing those loses you games. And so it's important to at least be able to check those boxes and say, yeah, Bears are pretty set on the ground game in both directions. We also see that this Bears team is getting closer to healthier. That, yes, the 2 safeties were gone. Kind of game time decisions are unexpected. I mean, Eddie Jackson was active, but I never saw him take the field. It was like, he was available in a pinch, but I don't remember seeing him take the field. I haven't seen a final snap count on that to see for sure whether he played or not, but clearly didn't play much if he was on the field at all, and I don't think he was. So in theory, another week before next week, he should be a little bit healthier and ready to play. Brisker's dealing with some kind of illness thing that popped up out of nowhere. Hopefully that's shorter term and he can be ready to go next week. But also for your offensive line, like Braxton Jones was practicing this week. Didn't play in this game, but you're getting closer to all 5 healthy starters on the offensive line and fixing. Clearly Larry Borom at left tackle is your biggest weak link up front. And not that Braxton Jones is a Pro Bowl left tackle, but he will be an upgrade over Larry Borom, assuming he's healthy or whatever level of health he can get to still be able to play. So like, you're in a spot right now where you're getting healthier. I know a couple guys got nicked up in this game, but I know Tyreek Stevenson left and came back. Tremaine Edmonds has looked serious, but he came back and then seemed to kind of re-aggravate. We don't know the exact extent there, but that could have been a lot worse than it was for him. Javon Dexter was dinged up on that play, but he ended up coming back in the game. Like, the Bears came out, in theory, from what we could tell right now, relatively unscathed and are generally getting a little bit healthier in that regard. And once you get a little bit closer to full strength, that can make the rest of the defense's job easier. It can make the rest of the offense's job easier. And you can start to feel like, okay, there are reinforcements coming, right? Again, it's not going to lead to wins and, turning everything around, but things will get better. Things are, at least in those areas, trending on the better side of the spectrum there. Your whole offensive line is trending that way. Nate Davis is only still a couple weeks away from potentially getting back in the lineup, but I don't know where you put him. That's going to be a conversation we'll need to have at some point in the next couple of weeks. Is right now, like, left guard seems like the right place for Cody Whitehair, although he's still struggling everywhere you put him. Tevin Jenkins is settling in nicely back at right guard. Lucas Patrick is Lucas Patrick at this point. So like when Nate Davis comes back, do you move Jenkins again back to left guard, and you move Whitehair back to center, or do you put Nate Davis at left guard? Or I mean, you can't put Nate Davis at center, so he's got to go at one of the guard spots, and then Tevin Jenkins has to go at one of the guard spots. So then Cody Whitehair either goes to center or he's benched, right? Or do you move Jenkins to tackle? I mean, I don't want to give them that idea. That would be terrible. But like, you're gonna have a problem with offensive line here, where the rare feeling of like you've got too many players you want to start. Like, when have we had that problem, right? I mean, I guess you don't want to start Lucas Patrick. It's not that you have too many guys you want to start, but like, there's not quite room in the starting lineup for all the guys that you might expect in the starting lineup. You've got 6 guys that have a good case to start here, and 5 spots for them, and not a natural spot to put everybody. So like, that's a good problem, sort of. I mean, listen, we're trying here, right? I mean, and eventually, Khalil Herbert should come back at some point, and this running game can be a little bit better as well. We saw Khalid Kareem make his Chicago Bears debut after they claimed him from the Colts, put him on injured reserve. He almost had an interception when he dropped back into coverage. So he was playing well, it looked like, out there. Curious to kind of go back through the tape and see if anybody else was doing much in the pass rush department there. TJ Edwards had a couple of nice blitzes on Justin Herbert, hit him a couple times. He made a couple plays in the running game as well. He's got flaws, but he was playing hard out there. You saw him, really kind of settling in. And Jalen Johnson made a couple nice plays, got picked on a mesh pattern, and they gave up a touchdown. But other than that, like, he was good at the catch point in the end zone. Tyreek Stevenson had his ups and downs. Like, this is a young team that's coming along here. And some of the younger players are going through their ups and downs. Darnell Wright had a couple of nice blocks in the running game. He wasn't like totally overwhelmed by the Bosa Mack experience. Again, need to go watch the All-22, but it wasn't a turnstile situation over there, right? It wasn't like obviously Wright is having a bad time. It was like, you have your ups and downs versus a really good opponent, but for the most part, kind of hung in there a little bit. So there's some things we can take away here, right? There's some positives. It's not all terrible from this point on, but we'll see what the All-22 shows, see if we can find some other positives in there. And of course, we'll have to dive in a little bit to what Bagent was seeing on a couple of those bad throws and why this defense couldn't stop anybody. Was it just bad angles? Was it bad tackling attempts? Was it good blocking by the Chargers? I mean, there's a lot to still dissect from this Bears game, and we'll break it down for you this week on the Locked On Bears podcast. Also this week, on Wednesday, we're going to talk to Matt Waldman from Matt Waldman's rookie scouting portfolio. He's one of the best draft analysts out there, and in particular, in the pre-draft process, he was very high on Tyson Bagent. I believe he gave Bagent a higher pre-draft grade than he gave Jordan Love in their respective drafts. If that tells you anything, it means he was low on Love and high on Bagent. It wasn't like he thought Bagent was a second-round pick, but lower on Love and higher on Bagent. But regardless, like, I'm really curious to pick Matt Waldman's brain about Bagent and kind of what we think his career can be. Not as like this year, but like over the course of his season, where he can grow and what his chances are of improving in certain areas. So come back this week for a great conversation with Waldman here coming soon. Then crossover Thursday, we'll talk to Ross Jackson from Locked On Saints, who's one of the best Locked On Podcast Network hosts. We're going to have fun talking to Ross Jackson. He and I are friends, and we talk a lot off air, so it's going to be fun to do that on the air as well, because Ross is just one of the best genuine people here on the podcast network. So even though the Bears are struggling, the Locked On Bears podcast is not. So stick around, hit that subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Keep up with all of our daily in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Make us your first listen each and every day, because then you can start your day with another opportunity to bear down.